record on this computer. There we go. And let me share our, whoa, hang on. Hold on, I did something wrong. I gotta go back a step. There we go. Okay, let me share the screen where we're at tonight. You know, we're starting in Romans chapter 12 and verse 9. We're gonna finish the chapter tonight. And Romans chapter 12 and verse 9 begins with 13 different separate imperatives. So we're entering a section of the letter where Paul is now using the theology that he explained in chapters 1 through 11 to begin giving some practical pointers and commandments. So here we go. We've got 13 of them that are going to come in just the span of these few verses on screen in front of you. He says, let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor, not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality. All right, so what we want to do is just cover those 13 admonitions one at a time. Why do you, and some of them are self-explanatory and we don't have to spend forever on them, but I think those are each great to pause and give a little bit of thought to. Why does Paul say that love needs to be without hypocrisy?
Is it really love?
Good, that's a fair question, right? Love that is not, that is hypocritical love, is that really love?
No.
What does that look like? Hypocritical love. Give me an example of that.
Well, I think lots of times it's somebody that you know when they're flattery with comments and they're overboard. To me, that shows that hypocritical love.
Good. I think you're absolutely right. It's the idea of loving for personal gain. I think, you know, to put on a loving face or do something, but all the while actually having ulterior motives and, you know, planning to use that to gain advantage over another person. So love needs to be genuine. It needs to be the kind of love that Jesus showed without trying to gain something or in debt to someone, but just pure service. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dottie.
Sorry, I just say showing love. There has to be actions if you really care about somebody.
Good.
Not just words, you know?
Very good.
Carol?
Anyone else?
Yes, Carol.
Because
Yes,
love is action. God so loved the world he gave. So there's action in love. You look at all these, I think I heard Dottie say the word action. So all these behaviors are to be without hypocrisy, to be pure, without fake.
Wonderful. Very good. You've probably heard that the word hypocrisy by the roots means something like a false face or having a mask in front of one's face. And it is the idea of having one's heart or one's motivations different from the outside. Kind of like some people have the ability to stab you in the back while they're smiling at you. And so, you know, the idea here is genuine love, not a false front, not false love. Okay, the next two things, the number 2 and number 3 admonitions sort of go together. It is abhor evil and cling to good. Why does Paul use such strong language there, such vivid language? I mean, he could have just said, avoid evil and do good. Why does he say, abhor evil and cling to good?
Well, he's not only talking about doing evil, but he's talking about witnessing evil. And even if we witness evil, we should hate it.
Good. Okay. Do you get the idea with the word abhor that Paul is willing to accept a certain degree of sin in his life?
No.
No, I don't get that idea
Oh.
either. It's not like, I can tolerate 30% sin or I can tolerate 20% sin. He's saying abhor evil. It's to appreciate just how bad evil is and what the consequences of sin is, and to say, be absolutely disgusted with the idea of sin and do everything you can to keep it away from you. How about clinging to the good? What image do you get when you think about clinging to something?
Mm. 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 Mm.
I think it's holding it to your heart and holding on to everything you got.
Yeah.
Good. You cling to something that you dearly, dearly love and don't want to let go of. And sometimes it can be a little slippery. So you really get your fingers dug into that thing and you hold on to it. And so, again, it's just a very vivid verb that Paul uses to suggest that, goodness is not a negotiable thing in the life of a Christian. We need to discern the difference between right and wrong and value good so extremely that we cling to it, we hang on to it for all that we're worth. And on the other hand, we push away sin and evil every opportunity we get. So it's an attitude in our lives that is uncompromising. Abhor what is, cling to what is good. Nancy.
I think it also kind of brings to mind other things that are looked at in the Bible, just like doesn't want you to be lukewarm, either hot or cold. No look. Well, he doesn't want or straddling the. That gives you the. We want to know where you are.
Good.
God wants to know where.
Excellent. No straddling the fence. No having one foot in the world and 1 foot in the church. Go all in. Abhor what is evil, and cling to what is good.
Is
one of those the best ways to understand both of those words is they maybe are not as apparently contrast, but they are, because the abhor is to turn away from or shudder or move yourself away from it. It's like a stink. That's one of the words. And if you've ever been in a place where there was really something obnoxious to smell, I'm thinking of a skunk riding down the road and smelling, or whatever image you get with a stink. You turn yourself away from it. You don't stand there and take it. You get away from that smell. You start flapping your hands. You do something to get away from that stink.
Good.
And that's what evil is. But the next word is cling. It's a sharp contrast to the image of abhorring. You get it? Turn away from, cling.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Excellent point. Anyone else?
Does abhorrence denote action as love does?
Yeah, I think so, because it is the idea of not going to tolerate sin in my life at all. So that's going to, my intense revulsion to sin and to evil is going to motivate me to act and to not tolerate it in my life and speak up against it. Brian.
Did you already use the illustration of a magnet?
I did not, but that's a great illustration. You flip it one way and it attracts, and flip it the other way and it repels.
So one side of the magnet pushes away, that's abhorring evil. One side clings, which is the magnet clings to, or what's the other word I want? It's attracted to good. So both sides of the magnet show the illustration.
Fantastic. Very good. All right, look at the next two. The fourth and fifth admonitions are: be devoted to one another in brotherly love, give preference to one another in honor. I think those two are meant to travel together also. You also see the phrase one another, which appears several times, not only in the book of Romans, but throughout Paul's writings, that reminds us that we're not saved in a vacuum, that we're part of a family, a church family, and that what we do to one another is an important part of our faith. So in this case, we need to be devoted to one another. That's the kind of affection and attention. Actually, the word that Paul uses there is of a family variety of love. And then he complements it by talking about brotherly love. In Greek, those two phrases are actually very similar. So it's just two different shades of the love that is shown. I really like the next one, though, giving preference to one another in honor. When I see give preference, I think of two things. I think, first of all, of that Philippians 2 passage that reminds us to not merely have our own interests in mind, but the interests of others, that I need to learn to put my brethren ahead of myself. And another way that I often look at this passage is to give preference to my brethren above and beyond the world. That I'm certainly going to have acquaintances and even good friends in the world. And I hope that everybody does, because that's my opportunity to influence other people. But that my best friends, the people that I prefer to hang out with more than anybody else, are members of the church, because we have the same hopes, we have the same dreams, we're pointed in the same direction, hopefully, and we want the same things for one another. And that brotherly love, that family love should be so strong that if I have a choice between going to a movie with a couple of my friends or going to the home of a brother or sister in Christ, that ought to be an easy decision. I can go out to the movie anytime I want to, but opportunities to spend time with brethren are precious, and I want to prefer my brethren in an honorable way in all things. I think of those two things when I read that verse. A couple of other things that just kind of are very easy to understand, but are difficult sometimes to incorporate into our lives. Don't lag in diligence. In other words, be busy about your faith. Don't be a high maintenance Christian. Be somebody who is giving more than they take. Now, there are going to be times in our lives where we have to take. We're going to find ourselves in situations where we depend upon the support of our church family. But if you're not in that situation, if you don't have those needs right now, physical or spiritual, then be a person who is a giver and a contributor to the work of the church and to the needs of others around you. Don't lag behind in diligence. Be a diligent believer, a diligent worker. Be fervent in spirit, I think, goes along with that as well. It's not just the frenetic pace of our work as Christians, but what's inside, the motivation, and I think this is lowercase s spirit right here. This is our mindset. Have a fervent mindset devoted to serving the Lord. The 8th admonition is just that, serve the Lord. That's obvious, right? But Paul needs to say that and drive it home, serve the Lord. Every decision we make is a choice as to who we are going to serve, whether Satan and the world, or to please others, or to please God. And whenever that decision has to be made, we need to put our service of God first. Rejoice in hope. So we need to be a people who worship often, and we have this joyful, hopeful aspect all the time. There can be bad news on the TV. There can be struggles in our lives, physically or financially, but our overall aspect needs to be one of joy and of hope for the future. And then let me pause. You noticed I sped up a little bit because I don't want to run out of time, but let me pause and see if there are any comments or questions thus far. All right. Go ahead, Dottie. Please go ahead.
Comment, rejoicing in hope. It's not, we don't rejoice in the results, but in the hope.
Good. What's a good definition of hope? In fact, Paul said something earlier, I believe it was Romans 10, if I remember correctly, where a hope that is a sight is no longer hope because we have it. So hope is something stored up in the future. If I say, I hope to win the lottery tomorrow, is that the same kind of hope that we're talking about here?
No.
Not at all. I can say I hope to win the lottery, or I hope to get a 1600 on my SAT, but it's very, very, very unlikely. It's pie in the sky. It's just the chances of it happening are really slim. That's not the kind of hope that is described in the Bible. It's actually the assurance of heaven, which gives us the hopeful basis by which to work. So it's because I know that I'm headed toward heaven, I'm a part of God's kingdom, that I have this bright outlook on the future with God. And so that motivates me in my everyday work. So just keep that in mind when you think of Christian hope. It is a confident expectation, not, 2 in 10 chance or something like that. Those are betting odds, and that's not what we're talking about with Christian hope. Bruce.
Just think that it's the ultimate.
Is also, but can the Christian hope be not for the finality of life, but hope within life, hope within a better life?
That's a great question, Bruce. I would agree that on a limited basis, that living as a Christian means that I hope tomorrow is going to be a good day, full of opportunities to serve and full of blessings. I think in an ultimate sense, Paul is probably talking about eternity, but I certainly wouldn't rule out the hope for the future of my life as a Christian. Now, I don't hold out a lot of hope for improvement in our country. I don't hold out a lot of hope for anything in this world to capture our attention in a way that makes us want to stay. So in a very real way, hope is a heavenly thing. But that's still a good point, Bruce. I'm glad you made that as Christians, we should be hopeful even for tomorrow and the next day. That's great. Brian.
Yeah, or like the challenges of the Jews and the Gentiles that Paul speaks of here, right? There seems to be hope in there for the Gentiles, where it had not been before. So I was thinking of that kind of hope, and not being just assigned to the finalness of life or our final days.
Yeah.
As Christians, we don't have to despair about every day. There's hope in every day simply because we have God on our side.
Excellent point, Bruce. Very good. Brian.
I was just going to say, I would hope for every Christian to have a wonderful life, and to succeed at all the dreams that they have in life and things like that. But there are a lot of things that God points out to us that can be gained through our suffering. Jesus learned obedience to the things which he suffered. We learn as Christians a lot through the difficulties that we go through.
Appreciate
Suffering produces endurance. We learn wisdom lots of times through difficulties.
We would like to learn through joy.
Yeah. We've got a friend who prays that she learns wisdom through joy because she understands most of the time our wisdom comes through our difficulties and the things that we lose rather than the things that we gain or the positive experiences we have. But I think ultimately, and I've often said this, that God doesn't care if we get to heaven missing an arm or a leg or an eye. He just wants us to get to heaven. But I still would hope, especially for my children, that they wouldn't have to suffer through the same things that Gigi and I have had to suffer through, and that they would have a more peaceful life, that they would have, a happy life and things like that. But I think ultimately God wants us to focus on the spiritual, not the physical here in this life, because the problem is, just like the rich man, when you focus on being happy here, then your desire for heaven is not as strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so your desire to focus on doing things for the church and for others is not as strong because you're happy the way things are.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. And you're also, Brian, some of us are harder learners than others. So,
yes, me.
let me get
and Gigi always says, she's always said this to me, and she's right. When we don't learn the things that we're supposed to learn, God keeps making them happen over and over till we finally learn.
Oh dear.
Rex, and then Bruce, and then Stephen.
I think, we need to have tribulation in our life. We need to have some pain and suffering along to appreciate what we do have, to have more hope. If you've ever noticed people that weren't brought up in the church a lot of times that become Christians later in life, they've been subjected to trial and tribulations and suffering. So I think they have a greater appreciation sometime where we lull ourselves into a sense of well-being, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's a great point. In fact, well, I'll never find it in time, but I have a book on my shelf where C.S. Lewis talks about the fact that God gives us good lives, but he doesn't want us to get so comfortable that we are attracted to this life as opposed to the next. So
sometimes sometimes you need an eye opener to let you know how good you've got it.
Yeah, I think so. Bruce, what were you going to say?
And, I was just saying, in Brian's statement there, he said, in suffering we gain endurance, patience, courage, and so forth. All those are things that we can hope for too, while we're in suffering. So, I hope to be liberated from sin. All those are things that a Christian can hope for from day to day. And it's not, what do you guys call it? Eschatological?
There is that
hope.
fancy word, yeah. Somebody uses that word, not me though.
Yeah, eschatology.
Yep.
It's not just that kind of hope, but I hope daily. I hope my children learn to cling to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in all of our prayers every day, we state our hopes to God.
Good. Very good.
And that's just what I was, the fruits of the Spirit, for instance.
Good. Very good.
The fruit of the Spirit.
Stephen, what were you going to say?
Well, concerning hope, our faith is based in our hope in the faithfulness of God.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew chapter 11 says, now faith is. This is what faith is. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Our faith are based in our hope in the faithfulness of God. So our hope is substantial because it is a fact. It has been settled forever with God in heaven. So they have one thing to do, but to be accomplished, to be fulfilled.
Good.
Our hope is substantial.
Very good. I like that.
It's the basic faith.
It's like a concrete foundation. It's solid.
Exactly. On the rock, eternal rock.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, we talked about persevering in tribulation, which is the next admonition. A Christian's life is going to have experiences of tribulation. We need to push through those things. And then the last three, I think, kind of go together: to be devoted to prayer. And I think that's a great way for Paul to say it. It's not like, give those occasional mindless rote prayers, but to be devoted to prayer, because that really is communication to God. Contributing to the needs of the saints. That's not just financially, but time and effort and energy to support the church as a whole. Whenever you see your brother needing something, to supply that need. And then practicing hospitality, which I always find that it kind of tickles me when I see that so often in the scripture. There are a lot of times that hospitality is mentioned. And I really do think that that's a good measure of one's devotion, not only to the Lord, but to the body of Christ, because it's a pain in the neck to have people over to your house. And we, especially as Americans, tend to be a little bit, private, and we don't want to be bothered. Let's go out to eat, but you're not coming over to my house. We have to vacuum and put away all the stuff. And I think especially in Paul's ancient context, this isn't just having somebody over for dinner. This is an itinerant preacher showing up in town to preach the gospel. And, everybody looks around, are you going to take him home? Are you going to take him home? Are you going to take him home? Jesus talked about whatever home took you in, and you go to that home and you stay there. So John talks about this as well in 3rd John. So hospitality in that ancient context wasn't just inviting somebody over for lunch. It was hosting a visiting preacher in your house. So that really shows that you're dedicated to the Lord when you do like Lydia and you say, Paul, you guys, Silas, come on over into my house and stay and use my home as your home base to preach the gospel. So, all right, that's it for those admonitions. We've got about 17 minutes left, which is good. We're right in time. Let me go to the next slide and let's read. We have 2 slides left. It says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Okay, so here's another one of those things where it's not difficult to understand the writing here. No translation issues. There's no interpretation issues. It's just difficult to do. Bless those who persecute you. What do we want to do? We want to curse those who persecute us and insult us and everything else. We don't want to do them a good turn. But what, of course, is the overall reason for that behavior? Which Paul gets back
Save
to.
the soul. We're trying to save everyone's soul.
Yeah.
Good. All right, good. What did Jesus do on the cross?
He asked God to forgive those who are crucifying.
Yes, and he could have called 10,000 angels, as Teron Gaines talked about this Sunday in the Lord's Supper talk, and he didn't. Instead, he gave his life for their sakes. Hold on. Sorry. Somebody else have a good comment. I got to text somebody here. I have to take a picture of our Zoom class and say it's happening. Why not? What's a practical reason for not paying back evil to evil?
It reflects on who we are too. When we curse other people, or we curse our enemies, it kind of reflects on our reputation, and it will close some doors for us that could have been an opportunity.
Okay, good. You're still not thinking in terms of like financial doors, but thinking about the salvation of that person. When we bless those who curse us or persecute us, it is very, very startling. And people wonder why in the world we're so weird and so different. And of course, that's our opportunity to talk about our relationship with Jesus. Stephen, go ahead.
Jesus healed thousands of people, delivered the demon-possessed, he raised the dead. I mean, he brought the kingdom down. Guess who was the mob that said crucify him? Same people.
His own people, Jews.
If he didn't heal you, he healed one of your cousins, auntie of your someone from you, because he healed everybody in the town, most likely. So these people, and the Bible said, ungratefulness could make us not wanting to it could get us discouraged of trying to help people. Because I'm teaching that to Hester. So Jesus did that. All God is doing, he's bringing rain to the people that curse his name on the movies now. And he's giving them health. And he wants to save them. Every time we make an invitation, or anybody, any place make an altar call, as they call it, is Jesus trying to save the people that are cursing his name. Mm-hmm. So, and not living for him. So I believe that we should more likely do things for the Lord and to get rewarded for the Lord. And I'm teaching my daughter this because not everybody that she gives one of their beautiful things appreciate it, and I don't want her to get discouraged. So, but it happens with God, and it happened with every one of us. Not everybody appreciate and value what you do. Jesus dealt with that, and I believe that makes it personal to us as to love everybody. We are called to call our enemies. So it takes maturity. It takes focus in who we're doing it for, who we're working for, and who we want to please. If it feeds the people, it won't last. Our encouragement won't last too much. So God is the first example. Jesus is the best example. Paul the Apostle, the best example.
Excellent point. Very good. Let me ask you this question. Aha, there they are. There they are. Let me ask you this question. When we do the normal math of defeating our enemies, let's say we're in a battle, and it's 3 against 3, and when we attack our enemy and we kill one of the opposing enemy, what's the swing?
What
It's
was the
now,
last part
it's
you
now
said?
3 against 2, right? Because if 3 are fighting
Yes.
3 and 1 is dead now, then now it's 3 on 2. Guess what happens if instead of paying back evil for evil, we pay back good for evil? How does the math change?
I don't understand.
3 against 3 again.
No?
It
You got-
could be 5, the same side.
Now it's 4 against 2, because if instead of killing my enemy, I win my enemy to my team, if I win my enemy to Christ, now all of a sudden it's not 3 on 2, it's 4 on 2. I have gained a plus on the side of the Lord by winning that person to Christ. And so, yes, Gigi.
I was just going to say, I mean, we don't know everything that's going on. And so lots of times our perception is incorrect. And I think, you know, I don't know. I don't know. Just
No.
basically, we're not all knowing. God is the one that knows everything that's going on. And though we might see it as evil, if we were to pay evil for evil, and it wasn't, I don't know. It's
No,
just,
can I try to
it's too
translate what you're?
tricky. Please.
Please.
I'm going to try to translate. I think I understand what you're saying. If somebody lashes out at me, I have no idea what's happened in that person's life that day or that week, and he probably wasn't angry at me. And if I would just absorb that insult or that Facebook post or whatever it is and return good for evil, then that person's is going to appreciate that when his day improves. And anyway, it's just one of those ways to win a person to Christ rather than making the problem worse. Am I close, Gigi? Yay. Okay, good. Go ahead, Stephen.
When I was 24, I was in a rehab center, which I spent 20 months. And me and another fellow brethren, another young guy, we caught a guy doing drugs in the place. So he was one of the staff. He was one of the one that used to mistreat me and treat me like very bad. So that was my opportunity. So I went to the big guy, and me and the other young guy went and told him because we knew he was doing this. And when the man in charge had the chance to speak to us, he said that we both said the same thing, but my heart as a Christian was a Pharisaical hypocrite because I wanted to harm him, not help him. And what better place to go than to a rehab center if he do drugs, where he was at. So where can he go better than here that we're going to preach to him Christ, that he needs to consecrate his life to Christ. And what better place than the house of God?
Right.
So, but you are trying to hurt him. So we have to watch our intentions in what we do. Because me and you could be doing something, but with different intentions. So we have to make sure we stay focused in the love of God and the will of God to save that person that fell. Don't be the Pharisaical hypocrite that passed by him.
Excellent.
So
Good.
we have to watch our intentions.
What happens if we pay back evil for evil, it becomes like a vendetta where it just spirals downward into worse and worse and worse things. I actually have some interesting illustrations on vendettas that I looked up. I'll just share one of them with you out of curiosity. 1954, two families traded several violent murders because it all started when one's family's donkey wandered into the other's garden. I mean, can you imagine a situation where your donkey got out, which probably didn't happen on purpose, it was an accident, and the insults escalated until several violent murders occurred. And yet Jesus told us, right, in the Sermon on the Mount, that calling somebody a fool is tantamount to murder. It's the same impulse of the heart if we're not careful. So it is very important that we do not trade evil for evil. That just goes down. But to overcome evil with good, which is what I'm getting ahead of myself. It's what he says in verse 21, which we'll get to in a moment. And actually, I want to read that last slide. But before we do that, there's some other things I just left on the table on this slide, and I just want to mention them in passing. Verse 15, rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep, means kind of the same thing that Gigi was just talking about, is taking a moment to try to understand where your brother is. And if he's in a bad situation, then to not go over there with jokes. It's just like pouring vinegar on baking soda. To try to sympathize, to try to empathize, to tailor our responses and our attitudes based on what the other person is experiencing. And of course, being not haughty in mind, but being of this same loving mind toward one another is an important part of that. To not make our own interests the most important thing, but the interests of others. Don't be wise in your own estimation, but associate with the lowly. That really is a big deal. To identify those who are struggling, whether it's the nerd on the playground or the person who hasn't been to worship services in a long time, and to actually go after that individual is a very loving and Christian thing to do. Okay, and then let me get the last slide up and read it, and then I'll go back to your comments again, because this just follows on the footsteps of what we've been talking about. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him, and if he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. And here's the kicker at the end. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Okay, couple of you had comments. Let me get those first. Bruce, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just, in one of the hardest things to do is to put other people above you.
Indeed.
To actually take that second or third or even fourth position on the ladder. But when we think about if you're going to be Christ-like, that's exactly what Christ did.
Mm-hmm.
He put everybody, the whole world and the world to come, ahead of himself,
Mm-hmm.
ahead of the torture he knew he was going to go through. And man, I know that's tough.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Anybody else that I had missed? Yeah, Brian.
Verse 19 says, never take your own revenge, which I think that's part of what it's been saying over and over here. Never pay back evil for evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then also bless those who persecute you. I think the point there is God is working on everybody's soul to get them to heaven. And we don't know at what stage or what point God is at working on somebody else's soul to get them to heaven. And by doing those things, we may ruin something that God has been working on for a while. And ultimately, God says, look, when God's ready to give up on somebody, God will take revenge. Vengeance is his to take, not ours. And so he says, leave room for that.
Yeah.
And it's very hard not to. And I think this is a great lesson right now, especially in our time. You know, we're on the cusp of people picking sides, and it's getting violent now some nights in these different cities. And a lot of us may be put in a position where we may have to face this temptation of wanting to take revenge on someone or pay back evil for something someone has done to us or people we know. You know, we need to keep these scriptures in mind.
Good. I'm glad you brought all that out. When we say, do not overcome evil with evil, but overcome evil with good, are we suggesting that people are going to get away with it? No, we're not. We're leaving room for God to take care. God, of course, is the ultimate judge. James talks about be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. God is usually the only one who gets angry the right way, the right time, to the right degree. He is God. He is the judge. He is allowed to show vengeance. We don't do that. We just lash out at our enemies. Go ahead, Brian.
Let me just make one more point about this too. You know, I have a weapon, and I know a lot of us do. A lot of us have weapons.
You
The weapons, the weapons that we have are not for taking revenge. They're for protecting ourselves. You know, Jesus and the apostles took swords with them when they went on the road. It wasn't because they were going to go out and seek revenge or pick fights. It was to protect themselves from immediate dangers. That's why we have guns, to protect us and our family from an immediate danger. You know, if someone kicks in my front door, that's not a situation of repaying evil for evil or taking revenge. That's a situation of de-escalating that situation to protect my family.
I thought that's what your couch cushions were for. All right. So if you look at verse 20 here, a lot of times people get confused with this illustration for good reason, because it's a difficult illustration. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink, for in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. And let's just take a stab at this. What are some of the things you've heard about heaping burning coals on somebody's head? Give me one of the crazy ones. Go ahead, Brian. You're on a roll. So
you do it because it burns them up inside.
Yes,
I don't believe that's what it's saying.
You're just gonna make them even madder, and the redness is gonna come up and steam is gonna shoot out of their ears. What? I tried to do you evil and you did me good. Oh, that just makes me even more mad.
Is that what burning coals mean?
Huh?
Is that what burning coals on the head mean?
Well, no, I think that is not the correct illustration or the correct understanding of that illustration. And it may in fact happen, but you get the sense after we've just read Romans 12, all of these verses, that whatever the illustration is talking about here, that when we are doing good to our enemies and praying for those who persecute us, that we actually mean it to create harm, or do we mean it in a genuine way? It's pretty obvious, right, that whatever this illustration is talking about, it is genuine goodwill toward that other person. So just a sneaky way of getting vengeance is probably not what Paul's talking about in this passage. So we got to find another way to understand it. Bruce.
You know, the last verse, 21, tells us that not to overlook evil. We're not to overlook evil, but we're to overcome it in a certain way. And
with good.
You know, for those that persecute us, and when we see others involved in evil, that may be our brothers and sisters or whatever, evil still has to be met. We're not to shirk away from it as Christians.
Good, that's true.
But we're to overcome it. We can overcome it with good.
Yeah, sometimes I think about what David did in the wilderness in the cave when he had a chance to get Saul out of the way, and then he decided, no, I'm going to let God take care of that. He didn't approve of Saul by any means, but he didn't want to take Saul's life into his own hands. Anyway, so the illustration, there's two major possibilities. Again, scholars are reaching a little bit because this is a historical context we don't completely understand. We don't have these practices, but one idea, remember, whatever it is, it must be an image of sincere goodwill and service. One image is that in the ancient world, if your kitchen fire went out, you couldn't just run over to hit the start button, and start your oven again, or even go get the matches or the lighter. That was a big deal. It was a major thing to start a fire, cooking fire in your home, so that you might call upon your neighbor and say, hey, can you lend me some fire? And what they would do is they would take some of the burning coals out of their own fire, package them up, and then bear them over to their neighbor's house. Some people would say, if you remember the images of people carrying packages on their head, of actually bearing it on their shoulder or bearing it on their head, and giving it to their neighbor in order so they can easily restart their own kitchen hearth. You'll see that suggestion a lot in the commentators and in the scholars, and that does make a lot of sense. So that if your neighbor who you hate comes over to you and say, I am so sorry, but my fire went out. Can you help me? No, you got what you deserve. Get out of here. But, and heap those burning coals upon them in a good sense and allow them to restart their fire. That may or may not be a satisfying explanation, but you'll read that a lot. Another explanation, the second one, is that if you remember Isaiah, when he was unclean, the angel grabbed a burning coal and touched it to his lips and made his lips.
Right.
And so maybe there is in here somewhere the image of helping to purify the other person by helping them get their relationship with God right, by doing them a good act of service. That's a pretty interesting suggestion too. Again, I'm not sure. I don't think anybody's sure, but those are just two possibilities. As long as we understand that whatever's going on here is an act of genuine and sincere service, I think we have the right idea. All right, I have to quit very soon because I have to go out there and teach, but let me see how many hands I can get. Stephen.
I personally believe, since it's not the one that was, the harm was made to, that brings the cold, but the in a I believe that he's speaking of, you know, when you are ashamed, very shameful, that you feel your ears burning, and your face turns red. So I believe that for me to do good to someone that did bad things to me is to put him to shame. I have to even want to say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. You're a good person. I mean, it brings repentance to him. It brings conviction.
So maybe not the burning of anger, but the burning of shame.
Of
To bring
shame,
him to repentance.
of now wanting to be grateful, to change his attitude towards you like forever. I will never disrespect you the same way because you don't deserve that.
Stephen, that's a great suggestion. I like that.
What was the
Bruce?
outcome of the coals on Isaiah's lips?
It was to cleanse him.
Right.
He was made holy. Yep. Dottie.
I was just say, bottom line, we see we can destroy our enemy by making him our friend.
Absolutely. And swing the math in our favor. Yes.
Right.
Very, very good. Very good. Who else? Nancy, is that a hand?
Yes. The thing that I have to keep remembering is that there's help on this thing, because when I get to the bottom, I think after 21, verse 21, there should be an asterisk which says, refer back to verse 12 where it says continue instant prayer.
That's very good. That's quite funny. Yeah, like I said, these are not difficult to understand. They're difficult to do. So, yep. Hey, Coy. Hey, Dusty. Who else? Anybody else? All right. Well, I do have to wrap it up, but it is marvelous to see all of you. I hope that you're doing well. And Danny, I hope you get a great night's sleep between now and, man, 2 a.m. comes quick. It's just 5 hours away.
Yeah, I'll be there.
You have to wake up at 2 or punch in at 2.
I've got to get up at 2. I got to be there before 3. Yeah.
Man.
Going to bed at 7:30 though.
You want me to call you when I get up?
No, thank you. No, thank you. Although Bruce did send me a link to a jazz piece at about 1:30 in the morning the other night, so that was pretty good. Which I did enjoy, Bruce. It was a good piece. It was a good piece. All right, y'all.
Get a good night's sleep, man.
Have a lovely day.
Hey, John.
Bye-bye.